Lawmakers are ready to get the regulation train chugging along. But it seems they may be scratching their heads on exactly how to do so. Can they fairly regulate so many exchanges that operate so differently from one another?
When you testified on Capitol Hill last week, you stressed the need to get a regulatory framework up and running quickly. How do you think last week's testimony went? Do you think lawmakers took your suggestions to heart and will act on your recommendations?
It's a great question, Talia. I think last week was a really important point in terms of lawmakers being able to collect insight and intelligence from a range of speakers. And it was clear from the questions that there is this movement towards trying to create a system of thinking about regulation that is much more comprehensive than what we have currently. As you know, Talia, we're kind of going through a process whereby we're having ad hoc actions by different agencies. It doesn't feel particularly coordinated at present, but to the extent that lawmakers are now focused on stepping in, creating a framework for different agencies to coordinate, building an agenda for what the priorities are. For example, one thing that came out last week was in relation to customer protection and disclosure. Another theme that came out was in terms of trying to make sure that our traditional financial system is also kept safe in this space. So I think their lawmakers are certainly very keen to hear ideas about how to move forward here. And I think that dynamic is becoming ever more urgent, given the fact that this market needs regulation extremely quickly.
In October, a month before the collapse of FTX, you published a 63-page research paper titled A Public Mandate for Private Oversight in Cryptocurrency Markets. In it, you acknowledge the digital asset market has proven notoriously challenging to regulate, and you make the case for mandating self-regulation by crypto exchanges as a key part of comprehensive public reform of those exchanges, as well as of crypto markets as a whole. You also pushed for this last week in your testimony on Capitol Hill, arguing that this will bring exchanges in line with traditional commodities and securities exchanges, where you say self-regulation by exchanges has been the norm for centuries. In a nutshell, what does that self-regulation entail exactly, and what is the main objective there?
The goal of self-regulation by exchanges is twofold. One, it's to make the exchanges responsible. The number one goal for having exchanges do self-regulation is to bring them under a framework of oversight at present. In other words, that in order to show that they can exercise oversight of their market, they have to prove to regulators that they have the capacity to do that. What that means essentially is that they have to go to regulators, show that they have the corporate governance, the compliance, the risk management to be able to oversee the market, surveil the market, make sure that they have the capacity to write rules if they need to, and also to discipline those that are using their venue. So number one goal here is to make them responsible, to make them accountable. And the other part of this is, this is a system that offers industry a way to deploy its expertise, to deploy its proximity to complex emerging technologies, and to use that as a way to mitigate the risks that are arising in this market, as well as to offer regulators a support that regulators can also use in order to make sure that public rulemaking here, that rules that are being made here are fit for purpose, that these rules are informed, that the exchanges are providing the intel or providing, collaboration to ensure that the rules that are coming out are going to be actually useful and fit the risks that are emerging in this marketplace.
But what if exchanges decide to go easy on themselves just like SBF did over at FTX? At what point does self-regulation end and the auditors come knocking?
How do you think the approach of self-regulation could work now following FTX's implosion? During your testimony last week, you even pointed out the lack of trust and confidence in exchanges following the event. So do you still think this method is the way to go? Can it even really be trusted by the masses at this point? I mean, I do want to point out that in your research paper and before the Senate Banking Committee, you acknowledged that self-regulation has serious shortcomings, but that this exchange oversight should be an important part of wider regulatory reform. And last week you called it a complement, not a substitute for public regulation. But following FTX's bankruptcy, can lawmakers and the public be convinced that crypto exchanges are even capable of this self-regulation method?
Talia, thank you so much for listening so carefully to the testimony last week. This is a chicken and egg problem here. The industry's reputation is in tatters. Millions of people have lost confidence in the capacity of the industry, particularly its key institutions, the exchanges, to deliver the trust and confidence that they were expecting. The way in which, we push exchanges to regain that confidence is something that is now being discussed. And I think that self-regulation by exchanges is a way to achieve that. In other words, that exchanges come forward, exchanges commit their resources, exchanges ensure that they are being credentialed by agencies themselves to showcase that they are being compliant, that they are performing, that they are there to protect customers. That is a start. It is by no means the end, right? But this is, the goal here is not to provide a wholesale, comprehensive regulatory solution. This is a part of the solution.
Earlier this month, crypto exchange Kraken agreed to shutter its staking service for customers in the US and pay $30 million in penalties as part of a settlement with the SEC. Now, this is just one example of many where the SEC has been taking action, embracing the so-called regulation through enforcement. What do you think about this approach by the US regulator?
Agencies in the US have a bunch of powers that they can use. Obviously, you need a strong regulatory agency that is taking steps to enforce the laws as it requires them to do, right? So, clearly agencies have a mandate and are supposed to enforce the laws and be a strong sort of overseer of the market as a whole. Equally, obviously, agencies have other responsibilities too, and part of that is rulemaking. And so, what is becoming, clear here is that, particularly at last week's hearing, is that there seems to be a real need for and desire for agencies to come forward and provide rulemaking that goes through a different process than enforcement does. What rulemaking offers is notice and comment, right? What that means is that there's a procedure whereby agencies are having a conversation across a large set of stakeholders, industry, consumer advocates, other regulators, for example, to be able to gather intelligence, gather input, to workshop the proposal widely, and then to incorporate it before it's implemented into the wider marketplace. Right? That is the rulemaking arm of what an agency does. In addition, agencies have a bunch of other tools too, right? They can issue, a variety of different measures that don't have to rise to enforcement. These can include things like interpretive guidance, no action letters, comfort letters that are provided to the wider marketplace to give folks an idea about where the agency intends to go. So obviously, enforcement is a part of the arsenal, but so is rulemaking, and so are these kind of calibrated measures. And the question here is, what will get us to a point where our regulatory system is going to be one that offers a comprehensive framework for oversight, but also provides a set of standards that are lasting?
Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching.